Alright guys, welcome back. If you made it through that first admittedly pessimistic and droll video, then we can go ahead and talk about weapons orientation. Okay. So as you can see, there are several weapon types that are available to us. Uh, the main ones that we will deal with outside some strange off-collar builds for Stem and Templar are going to be two-handed, one-hand shield, dual wield, and bow. Okay, so how you play with these weapon types are a little bit different across them. We do have a class spammable and biting jabs. Then we do have power of the light. So those are two things you kind of want to take into consideration when we start building. So let's talk about two-handed, which is going to be involved with all of your builds no matter what, and that's because of this ability right here, Rally. Okay, so this is going to be your source of major brutality, which is giving you that 20% extra weapon damage. It's also going to be, as it ticks down in time, your burst heal. Um, so when you are playing and you do want to get a little bit of a burst heal on, you'll basically purify, hit your rally, get what you can of that 8%. Healing buff to whatever the current tooltip is as it goes down. So the final heal is increased by 564% in proportion to the length the rally has been active. And if nothing else, until they put something else in the game, will always have this ability on your bars, unless, like I'm saying, you're doing one of those weird outside builds, like a dual wield resto, or I don't know, dual wield bow with a bunch of health recovery or some weird stuff like that. As far as the other skills in this tool set, so Dizzying Swing is kind of renowned as far as a pug stomper. However, I mean, if you're good at Dizzying Swing or like you get a little bit more comfortable with it, pug or good player, they're not going to dodge or avoid every Dizzying Swing. So where Dizzying Swing does have its ultra benefits is that its cast time is 0.1 second less than jabs, and it delivers all its damage if it hits. So you get it to hit, you get a nice big burst of damage, which you can then follow up with jabs. As far as gap closers go, if you don't have a snare and you want one, Stampede is a really good addition. The other morph is Crit Surge, so that just deals more damage based on how far you are. I've screwed around with Cleave, both Carve and Brawler morphs, and honestly, I'm not a huge fan. There's some like cool-ish things that you can do, and then if you have a Master's Battle Axe or whatever, um, it's not horrible, but it definitely falls way down the list of things that we'd want to do. Executioner, for whatever reason, is a better morph than Reverse Slice because I've never sat there and went, man, if I just had the splash damage, that other guy would have died too. And then on top of that, for what it just seems like it's more reliable. It seems like the damage comes at the beginning of the animation as opposed to the end. I don't know why. Passives are pretty self-explanatory. The two big key points as far as the two-handed passives, in my particular opinion, are follow-up, which is going to give you that 10% extra damage based off of a heavy attack for your direct damage ability. That's going to be like your Dawnbreaker, or basically just your Dawnbreaker. And then Battle Rush. The Battle Rush passive is great, especially if you have a decent enough base regen. For 10 seconds afterwards, you're getting that 30% stamina recovery. Makes two-hand a very, very potent, very, very viable, and very, very sought after initial, sorry, not initial, primary weapon choice. Alright. You got one hand and shield. One hand shield is really good because it gives you that minor heroism, also allows you to affect um, single targets with minor maim, reducing their damage by 15% with this ability, Heroic Slash. If you want to go into Puncture, it gives you Major Fracture, which you don't have as a class toolkit. Defensive Posture, whatever. Shield Charge, whatever. Reverb is another thing. So the Defile and Reverb really helps because a lot of Stamplar damage winds up coming over a period of time, so making that damage stick instead of just bursting over things. And what I mean by that is if you're attacking and their health can't go up, all that damage is sticking to the target, versus if you're running something else where you're trying to go higher damage to basically increase your damage over the available incoming healing. So it's kind of like just my terminology in regards to that. But reverb is great. It's a very good CC. Yeah, sure, it's dodgeable. Yeah, sure, it's blockable. But it comes out quick enough that you can animation cancel it with a weapon swap. And it's just ever so buggy enough to the point where you can land a good amount of follow-up damage there. Its ultimate is really nice in Spell Wall, where this helps Stamplars when you're trying to move around, or like you have a lot of targets on you, and since your heals are kind of meh and you can only remove 5 effects at a time, excuse me, it provides a very good defensive ulti, since we really don't have one in our kit. All of these kind of just go in hand with the one-hand and shield abilities. Dual wield's really nice, and it's kind of been a mainstay for Stamplar for quite some time now, mostly because your main spam bowl, if you want to call that here, or an accompanying ability, is going to be Blood Craze. One, it's very cheap. Two, it essentially is going to double up your dot pressure. So what your Blood Craze bleeds will be ticking for is in and around exactly how much, pending buffs on the enemy or debuffs on yourself, will be mostly ticking per damage what one of your higher hitting, closer to target jab tooltips are going to be hitting for. So it's a good way to really ramp up that single target damage. So Rending Slashes is nice because that initial cast is going to have a higher damage, and then it's going to have a snare attached to it. But I really do think the unsung hero about Blood Craze is going to be that health that comes in, because any and all healing over time that we can go ahead and have on ourselves. Think about Burning Embers with the DK. They set that on a target and they know they're getting that burst heal at the end. We're setting this on a target, no, we're getting that healing over time coming in. Also, because it's a weapon ability, it allows us to go ahead and make use of passives, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Steel Tornado, if you can fit it on your build, cool, nice little AoE execute. Quick Cloak in the current build I'm running is kind of my godsend. The problem with Quick Cloak and running it in a situation where you have Shuffle, you see how the duration is 15 seconds? Shuffle's duration is 23 or so. So until Shuffle gets to 15 seconds, Quick Cloak will do literally nothing but the little spinny blade damage part. So you're not going to get the speed. You'll already have evasion up, but you're not going to get anything about casting that ability if you're also running Shuffle until both the Shuffle evasion buff gets to 15 seconds, and then you cast Quick Cloak, or you cast Quick Cloak anywhere below 15 seconds. Hidden Blade, it's alright. Shroud of Daggers isn't horrible. So you're increasing your damage as people get lower in health, which is always nice because Stamplars don't always necessarily have an execute on their bar. You increase your weapon damage, your offhand damage, blah, 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 blah. Alright, reduce the cost. So Ruffian is going to give you a 15% damage bonus when anyone's basically CC'd. So that's cool, especially if you wind up setting and forgetting your Blood Craze, and then you CC a target while they're CC'd in that particular time frame. That damage that's coming in both from either, like if you have Quick Cloak and Blood Craze going, the damage from those two ticking at the same time is going to be 15% higher. If you're teaming with DKs, they got a lot of mobilization capability, or if enemies are under a negate or they're CC'd from Dawnbreaker, then things like Steel Tornado ramp up in damage. And then probably the most valuable passive in this particular toolkit, because Stamplars don't have their own Immobilize, and Stamplars don't have excuse me, a super reliable stun, because all of our CCs are basically can be mitigated by dodge, block, or reflect, is Twin Blade and Blunt. So what this does is there's a corresponding one and two-handed as well. It's basically going to divvy up your weapons to doing different secondary effects. So Axe is going to give you that bleed, of course, that everyone complains about. Mace is going to make you ignore 10% of that armor, or 10% per weapon. So 20% total if you have 2 maces, ignoring that armor. And then the sword is going to increase your damage by 3 or 6% total if you have 2 swords on. So where the swords are nice is it's going to increase your damage across the board with everything. It's not going to increase your heals or anything like that. Oh, sorry, daggers increase your weapon critical, which is also nice because we have a crit damage modifier. And every heal that comes in that's crit is always going to be nicer than a heal that's not crit. So the more crit heals you get, the better off you are in that respect. So I think the basic landmark is like at 17.5k resistance. Mace will outperform sword. That might have changed a little bit because they added like 1% maybe extra damage to sword. Swords are cool because if you do have like blood craze on, you're using swords, then that'll up that bleed damage. Bleeds are not affected by pen. If you're using a mace and using something like poison injection, that will up that damage as well as swords, but you're going to get a higher return on investment with maces or mauls, which would be the two-hand equivalent. And then axes are good just because you have that extra proc chance to go ahead and have some more damage over time effects coming in. So that's this, and then the equivalent, what is it, heavy weapon on two-hand is going to be kind of your flavor, if you will, and kind of determine more so what, if you're leaning more towards pen, or if you're leaning more towards just overall damage increase, or you want to lean more towards bleeds, or if you just want to have a mixed bag of a lot of different things that can come in at a target, there's ways to do that too. So then we go into bow. Bow's nice because poison injection with that master bow is very, very nice. Scatter shot, draining shot, still a decent CC, decent little heal. The ballista is, it hurts real bad when you get it on target, but I mean, I don't know, I feel like there's more productive ultis that you want to put somewhere. But if you want to put a lot of single target hurt into someone, you can go ahead and get ballista going. I don't like snipe. Volley's PvE, and arrow spray is whatever. The main draw to running bow is the ability to get major expedition. So it goes up to 5 seconds when you level it up all the way. But after a dodge roll on your bow bar, or if you like dodge on your two-hand bar and quickly swap to your bow bar, like kind of animation cancel that scenario, you'll actually get that major expedition, and it allows you to move around. We all know mobility is kind of in the crapper right now, so it comes in nice. So what you need to do and how you need to decide when you're building your Stamplar is kind of which ways you want to go about doing damage. So just some actual terminology. If I'm saying the weapon type first, so if I say two-hand bow, that means that my primary damage bar is going to be my two-hand bar. If I said two-hand sword and board, that means that primarily or majority-wise my damage will be focused to the two-hand side, with one hand in the shield being the auxiliary, utility, CC, so on and so forth. And then same thing, dual wield 2H, and then you do have things like 2H dual wield, which kind of flips it on its script and takes advantage. It takes advantage of the best of both worlds, but at the same token leaves you a little bit disjointed because it puts a weapon swap in between. Alright, so there's a couple of main ones. Really the highest damage that I've found in my time is going to be dual wield two-hand, so that's going to be your dual wield first as your primary damage bar, and your two-hand on your back. And the reason why is just because it's a lot more fluid to do your medium attacks into your blood craze, or start with the power of the light, and then medium attack blood craze, medium attack jabs, light attack javelin, and everything's kind of right there. The bulk of your offense is right in front of you. It's really easy to just keep throwing out damage. Then say two-hand and sword and board is actually really nice, again because of that reverb, because of that heroic slash, and heroic slash is actually going to do a good amount of damage. So you can power the light people up, throw in a couple of heroic slashes, and then when you get into those last 2 or 3 seconds of a power of the light, hit that reverb, swap back over, do your jabs, and then all kind of like come in at the same time. Then I would say it's a toss-up between two-hand dual wield and then two-hand bow. So two-hand dual wield has the pluses of being able to take advantage of some of the better two-handed passives because you're primarily on that bar, i.e. the battle rush and the follow-up. And then you also get the added extra stuff of blood craze, quick cloak, a steel tornado, or whatever, or what have you. So like the heal over time, the extra chance to just like kind of light attack, throwing bleeds. If you're running quick cloak and you switch back to your primary bar, because it's an AoE, it'll still proc the enchants from your back bar, which are nice. And they did reduce the enchantment values by half on dual wield, but that's okay because the way we go about it now, instead of putting that infused weapon damage glyph on there, is you either run sharpened with poisons, or you run one charged and then you run a shock and a disease glyph, because that's going to give you minor vulnerability, a source of defile, and kind of help you out across the board there. And then two-hand bow is nice because, like I said, you can put power of the light on people, you can poison and inject them, and then you kind of have the ability to move around. So you already have some damage on target before you come in and commit to, you know, your jabs or your basic combo rotation. Now, of those particular weapons, you need to also then decide what you want to kind of lean a little bit more towards. So if you're going one hand and shield, for instance, most of your damage is coming in very, very straightforward. So you'll have Dizzying Swing, which is very straightforward. Executioner, very straightforward. If you're running a gap closer like Stampede or Crit Rush, straightforward. It just hits you, damage is done. Then you have Jabs, which is your dot slash melee slash channel slash whatever the hell it is that they want to talk about. But if you're also running you have one hand shield back bar, this is direct damage, this is direct damage, okay, and then you have usually this as your defensive ulti. So it's way more beneficial to favor the fact that you have all this direct damage and using something like a maul, because then a maul is going to go ahead and allow you to ignore 20% of your target's physical resistance doing that damage. You're not going to have that damage on your one hand. You're not going to have that armor ignore on your one hand shield bar. But when you're trying to go ahead and push enough damage that your power of the light's going to explode, your Dawnbreakers, your jabs, and your executioners and what have you on your primary damage bar, you have the maul pushing that damage further and further into your target. So the maul's really nice there. Swords up there as well. Okay, but the thing is with the maul, that's going to affect any poisons that you have on are going to be buffed because those are dots. They're going to factor against resist. It's going to boost your power of the light. It's not going to boost your burning light. Sword will boost your burning light because it's a flat damage boost, but maul is going to boost a broader spectrum, and especially with the change to shields now, it's going to boost a broader spectrum of your damage coming in on target. So if you're doing two-hand sword and board, I'd probably rate it as maul being the primary weapon choice. Then it's really a toss-up between whether you want all that damage and then you're burning light to push a little bit more damage with the sword, or if you want a chance of 16% whenever you sneak in your light attacks to get a little dot, another dot coming in there. But when you have all this direct damage coming in, you could be a little bit more direct damage focused in your CP, and therefore kind of increase your overall damage. So you'll have like maul and then toss up depending on flavor between great sword and axe. Now, if you're going dual wield, unless you're going for a super high crit build, you should probably run two daggers. Okay, so with blood craze running, quick cloak, or even steel tornado, all these are going to have a chance to proc that bleed. So you're already doubling up on dots with blood craze. Then you have jabs. Let's throw another fucking dot in there. Alright, so you have twin blade and blunt. That's going to go ahead and give you that 16% chance, 8% per weapon, to get some more dot action going in there, and that's going to increase your overall pressure. Now, if you're doing two-hand dual wield, this is where things get a little froggy, because so bleeds don't factor against penetration, if you didn't know already. Alright, so when you're on your back bar and you have your two-hand and you hit blood craze, where your front bar weapon, I probably wouldn't put Maul at the top then, because that's damage that you have coming in that's not factoring against pen or penetration. So then it would be, for greatest overall damage, you'd have the two-hand greatsword, because when you swap over to your two-hand bar, the remaining ticks of that damage over time is going to be modified by your two-hand percentage increase of 6%. So say you put Blood Craze on a target, even, like say you have two axes, you put Blood Craze on a target, you proc your Twin Blade and Blunt, bleed, then you weapon swap over to the Greatsword bar. Those bleeds are now going to factor into that extra damage bonus of the Greatsword being on your bar, and is thus going to ramp them up. Um, so that's a kind of thing to think about there. And then the axe, if you wanted to go ahead and throw another bleed in there, if you find yourself using some type of weapon damage ability other than light attacks, then by all means throw another axe in. So this way you get even more dot pressure on target. So in a two-handed bow scenario, the initial weapon choice I would go with is a maul. Of course, then greatsword, then axe. And the reason why is because poison injection is going to be further boosted by the fact that it's a dot, so you're using a maul on these heavy armor targets that are all out there in the world, and it'll boost the damage more so. The middle ground, of course, being the greatsword, and then at that point in time, you're kind of flighty and kitey anyway, so you're not going to be spending a lot of time light attacking, really up in the face of everyone, combining a bunch of weapon damage attacks, so I probably wouldn't have put an axe there. So just to rehash that all again, if you're going dual wield two-hander, I would do the dual wield as axes, the two-hander as an axe, or at that point in time, whatever you want. Two-handed, one-handed shield, I would go ahead and do a maul first, and then it's a toss-up between greatsword and axe as far as what you want to do in your two-handed bar. And then on one-handed shield, it really doesn't matter what weapon you use because you don't get those type of passives. If you're doing two-hand and dual wield, I would personally go with, well, actually, probably a greatsword as my first choice, then axe, just because the extra bleed will help out, and then maybe maul. And then I would still run the axes on my dual wield bar. And then if I'm going two-hand and bow, I would for sure go with a two-handed maul, and then your infused bow for that extra weapon damage. Now, at the same token, if you're running you could run any other trait, I would always choose Nairn. At least have Nairn on for two-hand, one-hand, and shields. I would have Nairn on both my weapons. For dual wield two-hand, I would have Nairn on my main hand weapon, and then Nairn on my back bar weapon. For two-hand dual wields, is it two-hand dual wield? Either one. The same formula applies to two-hand dual wield and dual wield two-hand. My most recent favorable offhand trait is charged, because it's increasing the secondary effects of your enchantments by a good amount, so you'll have a high uptime on defile as well as charged. And then for the two-hand bow, it would be maul, then infused. Excuse me. Alrighty. So that's basically my essay on the orientation of your weapons there. Next, I'll try to show you or discuss how they all factor into what type of build, what type of armor sets to look at, and so on and so forth. So until then, guys, I will catch you later.